we all are confronted, in the business realm with the realities of the market around us. Things change, things evolve. And, we have that opportunity to either evolve with the times or stay stuck. Welcome to the Love and Leadership Podcast. I'm Star, and this is my co-host Trent. And we are entrepreneurs and just navigating through our journey of parenthood, marriage, and life. And for this episode, we are talking about rebuilding or walking away. So knowing when it's time to change.
Wow, that's hopefully going to be a really good episode, especially for our business leaders and entrepreneurs out there, because this is a very key thing that all of our businesses have to come up against at one point. And so, every situation is not meant to be sustained. At some point, we got to figure out, man, is this sustainable? Do we have to make some changes, or is it time to walk away? And so the question I'm going to ask to start is, how do you know when it is time to walk away or to keep pushing the grind button? But I want to start with a little story. And it involves a company that most of us know of, depending on the generation you're in, Blockbuster Video. Now, I remember it very key because of the fact that I was there every weekend with my family. We were getting videos, watching them, and it was great because at the time, the movies, guess what? You missed it. But the videotape, guess what? I can rewind as many times as I want. And even the DVD, right? And so it was revolutionary. They made a lot of money. They had a lot of stores all over the country, and it was something that was trendy, and it was thought, forward. And everybody loved Blockbuster Video. But like any company that grows and gets big, there's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some things people start not liking about you. And that's when people come in as competitors and try to figure out, maybe I can do something a little better. And there's one little company named Redbox. They come along and say, you know what? There's some things about Blockbuster that probably that people don't like, that maybe we can get a piece of their market. So they started popping up everywhere at grocery stores, and a nice little machine where you can just go and get a Redbox for $1, which was way under the price at getting a DVD or a VHS tape from Blockbuster. And you know what they didn't do? They didn't charge late fees. Blockbuster Video made billions of dollars off of late fees. And we all hated that. We could be missed the time by maybe a minute or two or a day, and they would charge those late fees, and they were making a killing off of it. We didn't like that. Redbox was like, you know what? Let's do something different with that. Now here's the change. Blockbuster had the opportunity to say, you know what? These people are taking a little bit of our market share. Maybe we need to make some pivot and change and do something. And every single year, Redbox is getting bigger and a bigger share of what they were actually doing far as with Blockbuster with their customers. And rather than saying, you know what, we need to make some changes, they said, we're going to keep the course. And I think that we can do it better because we're this big, bad Blockbuster. And another little bitty company came in, you may have heard it before, Netflix. They came in and said, you know what, Blockbuster, we got a little piece of your market. We're sending videos to people in the mail, and they're loving it. No late fees, none of this. And Blockbuster said, we had a chance to buy you, but nah, we're not. We think that we got this. We'll figure this out. And before you know it, 2010 comes, and no longer is Blockbuster here. They filed bankruptcy. And this company called Netflix, we've probably heard of them a little bit. They're kind of dominating some of the trendy networks of how we see videos and movies and all that today. So what's the point of this? Blockbuster Video, huge company, had a choice. Should we sustain? Should we change? Should we pivot? Or is it time to walk away? And I don't think they made the choice that was right for any of it, because in the end, they filed bankruptcy. And how sad is that? A company of that magnitude that made that much money, that affected so many people's lives, is not even a thought of in today's society.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely a very sobering story, especially for entrepreneurs and business owners. And like you said, I mean, they had all the resources. I'm sure they had the most brilliant minds. They obviously at one point were the ones that were the innovators and the ones that were, premier in their space. And somehow all of that just ended up slipping through their fingers. So, and even as you mentioned with Netflix, think about Netflix had an opportunity too to either keep what they were doing or to pivot as the digital space came and nobody was having to actually physically get a DVD
Hmm.
anymore, and they became a streaming network instead. So we all are confronted, in the business realm with the realities of the market around us. Things change, things evolve. And, we have that opportunity to either evolve with the times or stay stuck. So I think
Absolutely.
this is going to be a good conversation today.
Yeah. And it just goes to show that revenue is not everything, right? I mean, you can make a lot of money, but then if you don't exist next year, what was all the money for? A few people got rich, and then a lot of people now have to change jobs and careers and try to figure out what they're going to do, right? And so legacy is a big part of what a lot of us are in this for as entrepreneurs and businesses. We want to do something that changes the world, right? And so one of my favorite quotes, and we're going to talk about this company later, is what Steve Jobs. He gave an opportunity to somebody that he was hoping to, bring onto his team. And he said, you know what? You want to sell?
Sugar water for the rest of your life. And I think this person was the CEO of Pepsi at the
At the
time.
time, exactly
So
right.
he tells him, he has this good conversation with them and he says, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life or do you want to come with me and change the world?
Absolutely. And I just love that quote because I mean that's bold, right? The CEO of Pepsi, right? And to challenge him in that way because Pepsi's a pretty darn good company. Not that they don't know what they're doing, right? But Steve Jobs' mind and his mindset about change and doing what's next, and we're going to talk about that later, was
Yeah.
on another level. So, and he wanted people to be a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. So I do have just a couple of little summaries here from a study. So the McKinsey study, it says around 70% of transformations fail due to the resistance of change. So I
Mm,
think that's a key point of what we're talking about today is change. And first of all, the decision of whether or not to change, but then also you have to get the buy-in from everyone around you.
absolutely. Because sometimes changing for the sake of change, that's not necessarily why you change. You have to change for a particular reason. It's got to be laid out. It's got to be clear, concise, and you have to understand how to sell it and bring people on board, especially if it's something that has been successful or you have people that have been a part of something so long that they're comfortable where they're at. And so sometimes selling the change is a big challenge as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then with the Harvard Business Review, their study showed that leaders who adapt quickly outperform those who resist the change. So, again, a very important part of this too is to make the change when it's still time to make the change. Because if you sit on it too long, then all of a sudden you become the thing of the past, and
Absolutely.
and now you no longer have that option. It's too late. You're running out of time. You're running out of resource, and then the decision has to be made for you.
Absolutely. And good leaders too, we have to understand that we have to be forward thinking. We have to look at around us because sometimes we get stuck in the day to day and what's in front of us and the success we're having that we don't even see the world is changing around us. And so by the time it is that you see the change coming, it's like, wow, that's already in the past. And so now we're losing out because we weren't forward thinking enough to start making changes before the actual change was needed. And I think that's what happens when you have something very successful. People around you are always looking at how do I get an advantage over that person? How can we duplicate it and do it better? And there are people that are successful at that. And so sometimes because we're innovators, the way we stay innovators is the thing that kept us there in the first place. Doing something agent of change, doing something that was the first or forward thinking, and not staying stuck in that, but continuing on that journey even past the thing that you may have created in the first place.
Yeah. So I guess my first question to you would be, why do you think leaders and entrepreneurs sometimes hold on too long?
Mm. One, I really believe that pride is probably the biggest thing, right? A lot of times when we are successful at something, like we want to just make that thing just be the top notch thing. It's going to work. No worry about if it's ever going to fail. Like we put so much into the success. And when it is successful, it's like, man, we've made that ultimate. And it's like, how do we just keep this going, right? And then when you have to change something, sometimes you may think that, oh man, what I did is not working anymore, or what I created is not good. It's not that. It's just sometimes that we got to make the changes necessary to stay relevant or to make something better. And I think a sense of pride can get in there, especially when you start something and it grows. Then other people have to start coming in. And when other people come in, sometimes you don't feel like, well, it's still yours, right? And so when other people are
Yeah.
making changes to something that you've done to make it better, if you're resisting that change because it's not what you originally saw for it or wasn't your original plan, then sometimes that can hold you back from the next level. The hardest thing to do is to scale or to get something better because usually that involves other people. And so one thing I've learned in order for me to be better is I have to put really smart people around me to help make the changes and things to sustain what I already have going on. And then what that allows me to do is to do the thing that I feel is my biggest power is my brain. my mental,
Mhm.
and when it comes to things. So now I can think about the forward things that need to change or need to happen if I have people sustaining the other things around me. And if they're making little changes that are bettering my company or bettering something, then I can go and figure out, hey, well, how do I make the whole better in an aspect?
Yeah. And I think even besides pride, another thing that makes entrepreneurs and business leaders hold on too long could be identity.
Yeah.
Your identity a lot of times can get wrapped up into that company or that organization that you started. And it almost becomes like a reflection of you. You don't know where you start,
Yeah.
where you end and where it starts.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about that and it's time to either pivot or change, maybe it is time to walk away. Maybe the love and the drive and the passion that you had initially for it isn't quite there anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes we struggle with that because it is part of us and we remember the good old days and we remember what it took.
Yeah.
And so we're not ready to let that go yet. But we
Absolutely.
have to know when that time is and we have to move when it's time to move.
Yeah. So many people have a business plan and they have an entrance strategy, but
Mhm.
nobody has an exit strategy, right? And
Yeah.
so the exit strategy can be many things. It can be, hey, when do I feel like I have the capacity to continue to do this, right? Because a lot of times we feel like entrepreneurs, we can just keep doing this forever. But as I get older now, and I'm like, man, like I don't have the same fervor and energy and abilities I had when I was in my 30s, right? Now I've got to use my mind so much more, and I don't want to continue to have to try to make my physical continue to be the thing that dominates. So what am I going to have to do to maybe sometimes, I get out of something a little bit faster than when I first got into something. And so, and then sometimes the extra strategy, like, hey, am I going to sell this business off one day, or am I going to give it to somebody that can take it to the next place, right? Those are all things we should be thinking about because at some point, good things come to an end, right? And so, if you want something to be lasting beyond you, well, you have to be willing to see changes in that thing because the world changes, generations change, and what you gave somebody at one point is not going to be the same that's going to sustain the next generation later on as you continue on.
Yeah, for sure. And, of course, we're talking business right now, but I also thought about our family situations
Yes.
and children. And, you can't parent a 17 or 18-year-old the same
Hmm.
way you parent a 7 or 8-year-old child
Yeah.
because those kids are getting ready to leave your home. So, what do you have to do in each season of their life to pivot, to shift, to change how you parent them so that when it's time for them to go out on their own, they're actually ready for it.
Yeah.
And I know that that's an issue in our country right now is that, there's a lot more young adults that don't feel ready. They don't feel ready to really like get their wings and fly
Yeah.
and get out of the nest in that typical time frame because they haven't fully been equipped. We want to shelter our babies. We want to hold them tight. We want to give them everything, but we need to make sure we're not giving them too much to where it's a detriment and we're not teaching them how to be able to get some things for themselves.
Absolutely. And even to take that to another level, marriage,
Mhm.
right? Like if you keep your marriage the same as it was when you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and expect that's what your 10, 20 is going to look like, man, that's not going to be a good marriage because you change as people,
Yeah.
you evolve, your marriage should be evolving as well, right? And so sometimes people get stuck in places and they don't know how to get out of that next place. They don't know how to pivot or rebuild that thing. And so what happens is then sometimes you're forced out and you don't want to. And that's where the big D word comes into place because there was no evolution, there was no change, and people wanted to stay the same as when they first got married. And that's
Yeah.
not sustainable either because life happens, children, different seasons, like you say, and you have to adapt with those times. And your marriage has to learn to do that too as well. So anything in life, I feel this really applies to, but particularly in business that we're talking about, the lifeline of a business is innovation, especially in today's age of technology and those things. We got to be innovative in understanding how to connect with our customers and to make their experiences even better as we continue on. I actually have one as we try to start talking into like decision making and things.
Mhm.
What does it look like to walk away from something the right way, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, there's this quote in Batman,
Hmm.
I think it's the Dark Knight movie, but he says either you die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain,
Wow,
and
that's such a true statement.
and I think about that as we're talking about entrepreneurship and business leadership and staying in that position while you're fit for it because sometimes we're no longer fit. We're no longer really at our peak in our game when it comes to the certain skills that are needed in that position. And so we need to be able to know when it's time to walk away. And And I think about a lot of times too, it's, when you get to the place where you feel like something's so easy, you can do it with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
You just, I don't know, you stay there, right? Like you're in
Yeah.
autopilot. You're able to just coast along, and then I think also there's times when we feel like we're the only one that can do it, or we're the one
Hmm.
that knows how to do it best. But especially as you mentioned, when it's time to scale, maybe it's not time for you to get out of your position, but it's really time to welcome more people in
Yeah.
so that they can help you, so that they can assist you. Because if you want to grow, if you want to get to your next level, or if you want to take your organization to its next level, you can't, things should not look the same, a
Yeah.
decade later, 2 decades later.
Yeah.
Something has to change. It has to pivot. It has to grow and evolve. If you think about one of the key ways we know something is alive is growth, right? It's,
Absolutely. Yes.
we're living, we're breathing, we're changing constantly, and we want our organizations to do that as well. We want our marriages to do that as well. We want our families to thrive and to grow and to succeed onto their next level.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we all want is growth and success, right? And anything that we do, because but anything you are working hard for, it's going to take that effort to get to that success. And and sometimes that's how we measure our level of success. Now, hopefully that's not the only thing, growth, right? But usually if somebody is successful at something, more people want to be a part of it, right? Or more customers are going to want your product, or more people want to work for you, or more people want to use your service. So there's got to be some kind of sustainability of growth, like you said, to measure are what you doing or is what you doing working.
Yeah, and I think so I think circling back to what you were asking about, like when do we know what the right time is to walk away? The best time in my opinion to walk away is when you are still on the mountaintop, like you want to
Mm,
be able to bow out gracefully, you
yeah.
don't want to be like kicked kicked
Yeah.
out and pushed out
Yeah.
because, everyone around you is able to see, and you're the only one like still stuck in the past. And
Yeah.
hey, we did it this way in my day. And like, hey, it's not your day anymore.
Yeah.
Like the world has changed, it's evolved, it's shifted. And so we want to, a lot of times, the best entrepreneurs, you'll see that they have had multiple businesses. So they've
Hmm.
created this thing, it grew. When it got to a certain place, they sold it. And then they use those funds to start another business and then
Yeah.
another. And I even think about, in our experience, one of, um, our major partners that we have in the restaurant space, they were involved in the mortgage
Yeah.
industry years
Hmm.
prior, and then all of a sudden, that wasn't what was profitable anymore. The times had changed and shifted, and mortgage industry wasn't doing well,
Yeah.
and
They
they
decided to
had
sell before,
choices,
and they
yeah,
sold before it
and
was,
they actually
yeah,
sold
right.
before exactly. Whereas
So,
there's a lot of other mortgage companies that just kept doing what they were doing for as long as they could, and they filed for bankruptcy, and they were
yeah,
forced out, and they had probably no backup plan. So that was
yeah.
it. It was just the end. But the company that you actually worked for and was involved with, one, you were able to formulate that relationship
Hmm.
that worked for us later on when we went into the restaurant space. But also, with that particular company, they learned how to pivot. They learned how to shift
Absolutely.
and move forward.
Yeah, and I think about that. There was multiple people like minded too as well to
Hmm.
make those decisions. A lot of times, what happens when you get success and you bring people along with you, they get comfortable in that success, and then nobody is then making the mindset shift or saying, "Hey, we need to make some changes," right? Because you're being comfortable with the success, like you said, you're on the mountaintop. Everybody else is happy with being at the mountaintop, and nobody wants to ruffle the weather, the waters a little
Feathers,
bit, if
yeah.
it ruffle the feathers,
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like, man, we're all comfortable. Let's just keep here. And the thing is, if you're not outward looking, which we're going to talk about a little bit, if you're not forward thinking, then if no one's looking at the future or what changes need to happen to stay on the mountaintop, all of a sudden you're going to fall off real fast. And it could happen just like this, and you don't realize it. And you see, man, I thought that company was doing so well. What happened? And all of a sudden, nobody knew the quarter before they had their worst profits. And then all of a sudden it just tanked the next year. And now they had to sell out gracefully, right? Or ungracefully, as you want to
Yeah,
say. So,
ungracefully.
so there's a lot of things that need to happen to be able to make those decisions. And I think people around you, you got to have a strong network of people that are forward thinking, like minded, or can help make those decisions, so that you're not all just kind of stuck in the same place, and then the bad thing happens in the end.
Yeah, and in Proverbs it says, in the multitude of counsel there's
Wisdom,
wisdom. And so
absolutely.
we want to make sure that those people that are around us in our space that are advising us on what to do, especially with these big pivotal turns, are people that we can trust, are people that have wisdom, people that have built something themselves, and that we can, that we can really listen to their advice,
Yeah,
and it's something that not only makes sense in general, but makes sense for us.
yeah,
We want people that
absolutely.
really understand what it is that we need in that season and what is best for the organization.
Yeah, I mean, there's a simple old adage that says, if you want to be successful, find someone successful and do what that successful person does, right? And so, but that's up to us to go find that person. So, whatever stage you're in, find someone that's been where you're at and going to where you want to go, so that when these things come up, you have someone, a resource, or somebody you've seen be able to do something at that type of scale. We've been blessed to have people like that in our own life, and that's allowed for us when we got to the place of, like I said, we've created businesses, we've sold businesses now, and also we're continuing to create multiple businesses in other arenas. But that we only can sustain that by figuring out, hey, how can we be successful, and just doing the model of what other successful people have done and those mentors in our life. That's how we've been able to sustain those things.
Yeah, so we touched a little bit on walking away. So have a question for you. What are signs that something needs to be rebuilt
Mm,
instead of just maintained? So we can walk away, we can continue to do things as usual and maintain what
mhm.
the success we built, or we can pivot and rebuild without giving it all up.
Yeah.
So when do you feel like that it's time to see that that's the solution?
Yeah. I think first you have to have someone that's being very observational, right? Someone that can see, like I said, being forward thinking and seeing things ahead of time before they happen.
Mhm.
And then someone that also can also make fast and transition to as well. Cause sometimes it may be quick. You have to make a quick decision like, hey, let's formulate, let's get in the huddle, let's get a team, let's get a plan together, let's go. Some people that might freak them out. They can't do that. So they just stay along the course until they can figure that out. But I think the forward thinking people that can anticipate when change needs to happen, when something is going to, hey, you know what? I think we need to change this before something happens. And I want to kind of get into someone that I really admire as I've learned their story over the years, Steve Jobs. All of us know a lot of things about him when it comes to Apple and those things. But, Steve Jobs was not always the big success that he is. He's had a lot of failures that he's had too as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people, we see it as failures, but he wouldn't say they were failures, right? Sometimes the people around him just didn't understand who he was and his thinking. And so,
And sometimes we talked about like we need to know what season we're in. We need
mhm,
to know what atmosphere and like what the culture is around us to know if what we have to bring is going to work.
yeah,
But sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes we have something that is a great idea, but it's just not the right season
yeah,
for it.
exactly, right.
But like the world is not ready for it yet.
Absolutely, right. And so Steve Jobs was very smart, and as we know, he had Apple computers, and he built something that was really great with that company. And as he built it, it started scaling, and he had a company and investors and the board. And there's a lot of competition out there during that age of the computer. You had IBM and other people coming out with things, and so his thinking of how he wanted to create that machine was just revolutionary and different, and it was for different thinkers. And so many people didn't understand that at that space, so the people that wanted the more simple thing, which is IBM and those other computers out there, they dominated the space. And the people under Apple were just kind of like, wait a minute, our sales are not as good as theirs. We must be not successful. And Steve was like, that doesn't measure success. But at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. So as you know, he was, left the CEO. But like I said, entrepreneurs and people that are very smart, they do more than one thing. He went over to do Pixar and some other things that were amazing. And then as Apple was starting to really struggle, they're like, hey, Steve, come on
Yeah,
back.
let's
We
go
need
back
you,
to what we
right?
know.
We
Let's
need
go
some more
back to last
innovation.
time we were
We need some
successful.
stuff that really can
Mhm.
help us. And so at the time when Steve Jobs came back, his mind was set on something different. It was the age of obviously the cell phone started coming out and different things. And he was like, look, the computer can do so many things, right? But we're now on these small devices. We need to be forward thinking and figure out how do we get our devices and our computers to
Yeah,
sync
let's
up,
let's
right?
put a
Let's put
computer in
everything
people's
in their
hands, not
hand,
on
right?
their
And so he
desk.
started with the iPod, which everyone thought was crazy. All this music on one little
Mhm.
spot, right? That's not going to rewrite. And then what happens, right? Then it goes to the iPhone, right? And people are like, what? That's who's going to do that? There's no numbers on this thing. There's no, like how text. What is this, right? And everything he thought of was forward thinking.
Yeah.
And then he started being the trend, and everyone was now catching up to him. He started doing his little talks and unveiling the products, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, what is he doing next?" Right? And if you think about Apple today, even though iPhone is their premier product we think about, they're in all types of things, AI and different things that are forward thinking way
Mhm.
ahead of time because that was Steve Jobs' way of doing things. And so he was able to infect the culture of his company at that point in time. So it didn't stay at Blockbuster who just said, you know what, we're going to do this and this is what we're going to be until we die. But Steve Jobs was like, no, we need to be forward thinking and innovative, because if we can continue to be in front of the market, if we can continue to be the first and be out there, then our name, which is great already, can continue to dominate, because they're always going to expect excellence from us. If the Apple makes shoes right now, guess what? People go get them Apple shoes. Why? Because they feel there's going to be something excellent about it, right? And
Yeah.
so they have a brand that is known for that, and the only way they can continue that is by continuing to meet expectations. And when you start expectations, you better best believe people are going to want to have to continue those things, or you're going to quickly, not be what you used to be.
Yeah, that's good. And I think another area when we talk about rebuilding, we can touch on is relationships,
Yeah.
because there's some relationships where you've made a real commitment. Like you said, you're going to be there.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be, a place where we would encourage you to just say, okay, it's not working, time to get out.
Hmm.
So you really need to know like what is the investment that you have committed to. And I
Yeah.
think, for us in our marriage, there's been many seasons where we might have thought like, oh man, it would just be easier to
Yeah.
go my own path because, I have to wait for this person. Like I have to, like having to sync up with somebody in the thoughts and the direction and, like where you're going in your life can
Yeah.
be a very frustrating thing because we're
Absolutely.
all growing and developing at different levels. And especially us, our journey is unique that we got together as teenagers. We were
Hmm.
18 and 19 when we met. And then in our very early 20s, we got married right out of college. And so we were not full individuals we didn't even really fully know how to adult yet when
Yeah.
we were entering into a commitment.
Adulthood.
Yeah,
Really.
we committed to something where honestly we didn't
Yeah.
know what we were committing to.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna be with you till we die. But who knew what that would look like from, the 20-year-old space to, I don't know, 80, 90 years old or
Yeah.
whenever we leave this earth, like honestly didn't have a clue what we were committing to. And I think in situations like that, the rebuilding needs to really be your first priority.
Yeah.
So we can't just maintain and leave it the same way if it's not working,
Yeah.
but we also can't just, our first thought should not be just to throw it out and move
Absolutely.
on, because a lot of times when we're struggling with relational issues, it's both people that, may need to do some work and some adjusting,
Yeah.
and so we need to ask ourselves like, what can I change? Not just look at what does the other person need to change,
Yeah.
but like how do I need to grow in this
Yeah.
scenario?
And before we pivot to the next place in this, I want to go base more deeper what you just said. The rebuilding of something. What if we refreshed it first so we didn't have to
Mhm.
rebuild, right? If
Mm.
we refresh something and keep it nice and keep it up to take, I think about, just, when people remodel things and, a lot of times the easiest thing is like, oh, let's just freaking get another house, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do you got to do? You got to pay more money for it,
Yes.
rebuild
And
memories,
then the
start
economy's
again.
different by the time you do that. So
Right?
now you
And
might
and
get
the
a higher
investment, yeah. And
interest,
so the
you
investment you
know?
put into that initial thing now is like not as valuable as when you put that initial investment in the first thing, right? So sometimes working on that and keeping it fresh, keeping it alive, doing the things you need to do to make sure that that initial house is what it wants to be, what that initial relationship is, keeping it refreshed and keeping it lively, being forward thinking, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that seasons are going to change, right? If seasons change, what do you prepare for in the winter? Guess what? I get my winter stuff out, right?
Mm.
If you never pull out your winter coats, you're going to go outside cold every single day, right? So if you already know the seasons are going to change and something is going to happen and change, be ready for the change, right? And do the things it takes to remodel versus I got to go start and build all over again, because rebuilding is a lot of work. Now, is it
Yeah.
still worth it? Yeah, because at the end of the day, the whole thing is about sustainability and making sure that the initial foundation that we built never goes away, right? The initial business we created, that's not going to go away.
Yeah.
But we don't want to always have to rebuild, because that takes a lot more work and a lot more effort. If we can keep it fresh and be able to keep doing the renovation work that needs to happen throughout something, then you can have a longer sustaining business. You have a longer sustaining relationship, right? And then the thinking of that, it's like, man, this is already nice. What can we do to make it nicer?
Yeah.
Right. Versus like, man, this is trash. We gotta start all over again. Right. And
Yeah.
so either way, you just have to figure out which one of those you want, and whatever you focus on is what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's good. Whatever you focus on is what you're gonna
What you're
get,
going to get. Right.
That's what's gonna grow, whatever you're feeding into.
And so the next question, as we go into this and put an aspect of leadership and faith to this conversation,
Mhm.
how do you separate fear from wisdom when making these type of decisions when it, to pivot or to leave?
So for me, I've mentioned before that, I've had a lot of struggles with anxiety. So I think sometimes, like I get that knot in the pit of my stomach
Yeah.
when something is not right. But sometimes I just get that knot when something is changing
Yeah.
because change for me triggers a lot of anxiety as well. So when that feeling comes, I used to kind of shut me down and just say, oh my goodness, this is like, I don't want nothing to do with this thing. But sometimes it's not necessarily that what you should be thinking, you
Hmm.
know? Your body, your nervous system is just sort of like, "Wait a minute, whoa, this is different." Like, "Give me a minute, I don't know what's going on here."
Yeah.
And so we also have to just, like, look into ourselves and give ourselves what we need in order to be able to make that best decision.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of times it's time. I need time to process. I need
Yeah.
time to think. So if you come at me with this crazy idea, like I'm gonna look at you like a deer in a headlight and I'm just gonna shut down.
Yeah.
But, if you give me time to really think on it, pray on it, maybe do a little research, sleep
Hmm.
on it, like I'll be able to come up with like my piece of what I need and maybe the questions that I would have. Okay, you want to do this big crazy thing, have we thought about this? Like have we talked to our mentors? Have we looked at the finances? Like have we projected out and looked at, okay, what is the next 5 years looking like with this commitment or the next 10 years?
Yeah.
So I think for me, and then we're very different when it comes to, like how we operate.
Yeah.
You love big, you love different, you love creativity, you love something that's never been done. And then, I'm always thinking about, well, like maybe it's never been done because it shouldn't have been done. Maybe it's just not a good idea at all. So we also have to both like give each other the space we need.
Absolutely.
Like I have to honor your creativity and your big ideas. And, I have to honor the fact that like if it was up to me, we'd probably never change and pivot, and that
Hmm.
would be very bad as well. So, like, we have to always learn how to work together with our team to make sure that we're, like we're doing what's needed for our home, for our company, for our relationships, and we're moving forward together.
Absolutely. And so it's a balance in there, right? And so, like you said, you got to take some time, right? But don't let time cripple you where you never make the decision because it's like, I
Or
need
you
more
make
time,
the
right?
decision too late.
And you make it too late,
Yeah.
right? And so, but also too, you don't make decisions in haste because of excitement or because, oh my God, if we don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So one of the scriptures in 1 Timothy it talks about, hey, God's not giving us a spirit of fear, right?
Hmm.
But one of power, love, and a sound mind, right? And so that sound mind is the making that wise decision, making the one that's timely in the right time. And so when we don't fear and we don't make things out of fear, it gives us an opportunity to make it out of the right place, which is one that's a sound mind and somebody that's stable and something that's sustainable and that you've had thought about. And so, and I think that's where our balance has gone, where, like I said, the excitement has been tamed a little bit, but your slowfulness of making decisions, because like, I don't know if we should do that because of the fear have come and we've met in the middle to where
Yeah.
it's now balanced where it should be. And I think that's a good thing. And I think all companies, all families, all marriages need that sustainable balance. We're both, because we're all different, right? And so when you have two people that are all the way over here, guess what? That's not always great because somebody has to be able to come over here and be like, hey, what about this over here? And so, and then vice versa, depending on the side of the spectrum that you're on that.
Yeah, and I think about some specific tangible examples, like in our travels, a lot of times you'll plan things of like places we've never been and
Hmm.
things we're eating that we've never, eaten before. Or, I also have a fear of heights. So there's
Yeah.
all these things that you're like, I remember when we did the helicopter ride in
Mm,
Hawaii.
yeah.
That would not have been something I would have chosen to
Yeah.
do. But, you planned it anyway. And like, hey, surprise, we're going to do this. And it was terrifying, but it was also amazing,
Yeah.
and just to be able to have that memory and the beauty and, just the things that we can experience when we come out of our comfort zone. But then there's also been times, I remember that time when there was a vehicle that you wanted to buy and, like the guy at the dealership, and of course we were younger then. So, we didn't have as much experience, but, the guy was like pumping you up. This is your perfect car. And, the interest rate just wasn't where I felt comfortable.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I was just like, gosh, I just need to let him do it because I don't want to deal with him being upset with me or being disappointed.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I respectfully voiced my concerns. And even though you were a little salty and,
Yeah.
probably mad and didn't talk to me that night, the dealership called you the next day and was like,
Yeah.
look, we're going to cut it to this amount. Like, we
Yep.
really need your business. And then it was win-win.
Yeah,
You
for
got the car
sure.
that you wanted, but you got at the interest rates that I
Yeah,
felt
and you were
comfortable
happy
with.
about it because the thing about if
So,
I'd have made a decision without your happiness, that would have lasted much longer. Because every time you saw that car, you'd be like, "Man, you didn't listen to
I would
me,"
have been salty
and I got
every
that
time I
elsewhere,
saw
right?
the car.
And so I'll take a little saltiness for that moment, but the
Yeah.
wisdom in me at that point in time, because I had to grow to that. I'm
Yeah.
very impulsive, especially when I was younger, and just making decisions I want because I want it now, and that's how it's going to be. But then honoring you and your thoughts and that balance that I know I need, like, hey, maybe it's you're right. Maybe that interest rate is a little high. I just wanted that car really bad. And you're like, hey, if it gets cut, that means it's meant for you. If they'll call you back, like don't be out there so hasty. They want to sell you this car, but they'll call you back. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And because I honor that, I think that God made that a moment for us to remember. So we were
Yes.
able to kind of build on that for future decisions, and that's kind of how we base all our decisions now. Like, when we
Yeah.
both make it, we bring our thoughts to the table and we are able to agree, even if it's agree to disagree sometimes. But in the end, we're respectful enough to be able to say, hey, this is what I bring to the table. It's what you bring. Let's make a decision based off that now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also it's always really important to ask like what the bigger picture is, like
Hmm.
what's the meta narrative, like
Yeah.
what's the story within the story. And for us, like you said, maybe it wasn't even about the car. I don't even honestly, I don't remember which car it was or what it
Yeah.
looked like at this
It was
point.
that Suburban.
Because
So I remember it.
that was a long time ago, many
Yeah.
years ago. But I remember that was an opportunity, because before that we would really get into a lot of arguments about decision making. There
Yeah,
was
for sure.
like your taste versus my taste, two
Hmm.
different things. I'm very thrifty by nature. My family grew up in poverty, and not only in poverty, but we like shunned wanting materialistic
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
We grew up in a religious organization, and we were all about like, oh, that's the things of this world,
Yeah.
so it was almost like a mindset that I had to overcome, where it's okay to have nice things. Like,
Yeah.
God does not want all his children to just be dirt poor,
Yeah.
like we should have something that other people like also can say, wow, that's a good life. The Bible talks about like, if you yourself want to give good gifts to your kids, imagine how much more your heavenly Father wants to give them to
Absolutely.
you. So, but anyways, but yeah, so I feel like even in those seasons, the lessons we were learning along the way, the negotiation we were having to
Yeah.
experience as a young couple really benefited us later in life as a couple, and
Yeah.
then also as business partners.
Yeah, and that's in essence of, like I said, we're talking about how do we learn to rebuild, rebrand, pivot. Like when you have that dialogue, you can take off to
You get
somebody.
better
If you
and
get a
better at
balance, you
it.
get better
Mhm.
at it, and then you have somebody with you in these decisions. But when you're making these decisions by yourself, a lot of times you can make the wrong decisions, or people that are just like you. The board of Blockbuster again. I'm sorry to keep bringing you up, but you did file bankruptcy, right? So, but yeah,
Leave
we just
Blockbuster
right. I
alone
know
now.
it's nothing personal. We're just using you for the podcast story, right? But yeah, just that when you don't make decisions, the right decisions, or people around you, that, or listen to that one voice that might be in the room. It's like, hey, I'm over here, probably listen to me, right? But everybody else like, nah, we're gonna do it our own way, and then you don't get that balance that you need sometimes, and you can miss out on something very, very, good in the future, and it could be a very expensive one too, also.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, like what do you feel like it means to trust God when you're trying to make those decisions,
Mm.
staying, letting it go, or just maintaining for a while longer?
Yeah. I think actually I heard this not too long ago. But and it really challenged me about how God's role is in our life. And for me, of course, we're not shy about our faith and saying that God is our father, and he's the one that controls everything we do. We love him, we believe in Jesus, and but a lot of times, when you live life and you have success or you're doing things, a lot of times you do things out of just routine, out of your gifting. And a lot of times you can make a decision, and then after you've made a decision, it's like, oh, wait a minute,
Now we ask
God,
for help.
what do you think about this, right?
Yeah.
And I was challenged by the person that says when we make a decision like that, where we make a decision and ask God about it after the fact,
Mm.
he's now a consultant and not an authority.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
so,
good.
like,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that he's my authority in my life.
Mm.
So I need to go to him first when I have an idea of something. It's almost like you, like, hey, like when I wanted to buy that car, I've got to do that with you. I can't buy the car and then bring it home, which I've done, right? Or almost bought a car, brought one
Yes.
home.
Look,
Let's
that's
not
a
get it.
whole nother
That's a whole nother story,
story.
right? And so I didn't buy it, but I brought it home to make sure she was
We've
going
been
to buy
through
it,
some
right?
things.
Right.
Look,
And so,
25 years.
but instead, like it's like, hey, we bring you alongside of this with me so that we
Uh-huh.
make the best decision, right?
Yes.
That's the authority you have in my life as my wife, as my co-partner. And God needs to be that in our life. God needs to be that co-author of our life and say, hey, like, God, what do you think about this? Should I do this? Like, give me, your thoughts on it, right? Sometimes we wait, God, give me a sign, right? And that could be that too as well. But I feel like I've gained this close relationship with him, through my prayer time and meditation, or even just reading his word. Like I get confirmations or in that meditation time where he'll give me visions and give me dreams or things that I want to do next. And a lot of times when it comes from a place of that, I know, man, that was inspired by him. And
Yeah.
so that was a decision I know that I was along with him on. But there's been some things where like I just got going. I was like, oh, it's a good idea. And just went. And I was like, wait a minute. God, what do you think about this? And then because we've already made that decision and we're
Yeah.
invested in that thought process, we will just hear God's, whether he say yes or no, we'll just say, God, he'll co-sign on it. Or we'll just say something like, well,
He'll
he'll
forgive me.
forgive me, or you know what, we'll see as it goes. If
He'll
it's
bless it.
successful, he's going to bless it. And it's like, sometimes that could be the
Yeah.
trick of the enemy. Like every good thing's not a God thing, right? Everything that is successful is not maybe
And
successful
the more
for
you
us.
have, I feel like the more opportunities are presented
Yeah,
to you.
absolutely.
And so that's conversations that we've had as
Yeah.
we've continued to grow in this business space is, like, hey, we just need to know up front that there's going to be even more opportunities the more we're putting ourselves out there. But we don't have to take every single one. We
Yeah.
need to be, if anything, that should allow us to be more exclusive and selective
Yep.
in our decision making.
Absolutely. And I've said this, I've had to make this prayer on my own, and I really mean it. I stand by it. I said, God, please, even when I don't consult you up front, I'm trying not to, just it's life, I'm human. But God, open the doors that needs to be open and shut the ones that need to be shut. Because I feel like if we're able to do that, if we'll be okay with what happens and say, you
with
know what,
the
God's looking
decision he
out,
makes,
then I have to be at peace with whatever happens, knowing that that was God's will for whatever was supposed to happen. So,
Yeah.
and so far we've been doing pretty good with that,
Yeah.
And so we've got a little way to go with some things as we continue to grow and expand in some other things. But even this podcast, right? This was like one of those things that we had to say, hey, God, this is what you want to do. And I know it's a God thing. Because we were like, man, should we do this? Should we not? But we put ourselves out there and said, because we knew this was obedience to God, and just putting ourselves out there to help people that, maybe need this information of the life that we've lived to this point in time, And so this was a good God thing. This was obedience to being of him, and one of the decisions we've made to honor him when it comes to how do we continue to make decisions on starting something new to build, or when it's time to let something go. So this was definitely a building thing that God put in our life to be able to do and share with others.
Yeah, and it is an opportunity, obviously, for us to speak about our faith. And, we literally cannot tell of our, business and our, our wins without telling people about our faith, because
Absolutely.
it's like,
It's all intertwined.
yeah, it's because of our faith
Yes.
that we have experienced the success in our marriage, in our life, and in our business that we have. But
Absolutely.
so as we wrap up, we have some questions for the viewers and the listeners to really like ponder on and think about their own life. The first one here: where in your life are you holding out on fear instead of for purpose?
Yeah.
So something to think about for sure.
Absolutely. The next one is, what situation might require adjustment instead of more effort? Sometimes, we may think like, oh, we got to grind. And it could be just a simple decision, right? So we got to go back to the drawing board and just reevaluate everything we're doing to see how that change needs to be so we can make the proper decision.
Yeah. And lastly, what would it look like to make a decision rooted in clarity and faith?
Wow. If we made every decision like that, we'd be doing some
right. we would have avoided a lot of pitfalls.
Absolutely,
We're
right.
doing all right, but
so
we've been through some
clarity
things for sure.
and faith, right? And so, and hopefully this podcast is helping to bring some clarity to you. If you haven't subscribed, by the way, make sure you subscribe at Love and Lead Pod right here on YouTube. We're on all the other Apple and Spotify and those things too as well. Visit us on our Instagram page and also on our Facebook page. And we want to continue to connect with you so that we can continue to bring the things that have been God's wisdom in our life and clarity that we've been able to do. We've had a little bit of success, and so we want to make sure we share that with you guys, and also the wisdom and also the things that other people have told us, and also tell you those things that we didn't do so well so that you could avoid some of those pitfalls as well. And so, but hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Again, we got to know when it's time to pivot, when it's time to preserve, or then, sometimes we got to let things go, right?
Yeah.
And all those decisions are hard, but at the end of the day, it's got everything to do with your future and making the right decision. So join us for another episode of the Love and Leadership Pod. Again, this is my beautiful wife, Star, my co-host, my partner and everything. And we hope you enjoyed this episode, but always remember to make sure you love well, lead with purpose, and steward what matters.